You're listening to Get to Know World of Warships, a podcast created by Boggsy and Synpax.
Hello. We're back with another episode of Get to Know World of Warships. And this time, I'm the one telling you that this is a very special episode. As most of you know, Boggsy is a paid actor. You can't always believe what he says because actors, by definition, will sometimes be told to say things. So this is actually an extra special episode. It's extra special for two reasons. One, because we have the one and only Crysantos with us from EU, which we greatly appreciate his time. The other one is because this is the first ever podcast where you're hearing take two. What do you think?
Why is that, Borla? Why are we hearing take two?
I think, Boggsy, I think you're the best one to explain to the folks at home why this is take two.
Well, let me do that. Hi, I'm Troy McClure. You might remember me from the time that we did this podcast before and I screwed it up. So we actually had Crysantos donate an hour and 40 minutes of his time to do what I would argue is probably one of the best podcasts, if not the best podcast we've done so far, and then I screwed it up. I adjusted the settings on my OBS software, which I use to stream and to record this podcast. I set them to custom so that I could change the quality of my stream for the better. But when I set them to custom, it changed the output mode for the recordings that I do, and it saved the podcast that we did with Chris in a new format, and I didn't realize it. So when I opened it in a way that was not conducive to the file format, and then kind of got confused at what was going on, saved it, and corrupted it. I completely destroyed an hour and 40 minutes of hard work, good conversation, and Crysantos' time.
So there you have it.
So
folks.
this is very
why we
special.
have take two.
Yeah.
Boggsy, I usually keep an eye on the forums, Reddit, watch what's going on in the World of Warships world. It's been pretty quiet the past few days, huh?
It has been. It's been especially quiet. Nothing happened. Maybe we should talk about the history of what used to be in World of Warships and no longer is.
Yeah, that was the original idea when we got Crysantos, was to talk about game mechanics that were in the game once upon a time that are gone. A lot of us, as we look at social media and see things, we see complaints and whatever about CVs or subs or other things. For those of us who have been around for a long time, and I've been in the game for over 6 years, Crysantos has been around for a long time, there's a lot of improvements that sometimes we forget about. So we'd like to welcome Crysantos. And Crysantos, what do you think about talking about some of the improvements that have been made over the years?
Yeah, hello everybody, and thank you for having me. For me, this is an absolute perfect topic to talk about. It seems so familiar.
Why is that?
Because we've spent like 100 minutes on talking about, ghosts from the past, and it was a really fun episode, and I can guarantee it was the best episode ever, and it will probably be, because you will never get to hear it.
True.
But no, it was really fun to talk about World of Warships and what actually changed over the course of the last few years, and I hope we get into the same mood as last time, just reminiscing about all the things that used to be there, whether good or not.
Right. Well, one of the cool things that we got to do last time that no one will ever hear was we got to learn a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and how you got to be one of the twins. How you got to be in the position that you're in now, which is obviously folks will know you as one half of the EU stream team, along with Mr. Conway. You guys present new content on Twitch. You guys narrate the tournaments. You guys are very visible. So can you just, before we go down memory lane and talk about the Ghost of Warships past, can you just give us and the audience a little idea of who you are and where you came from?
Sure, absolutely. If you're wondering what I'm doing right now, my title is quite funny. It's called a community producer because I'm both responsible for the community team in Europe. We're located in the Prague office, but I'm also running a lot of global projects, for example, everything streaming, the official Twitch channel, for example, everything related to Twitch, be it, for example, Twitch drops, and other aspects, for example, the official Discord. All of these things originated from us, and I'm basically in charge of them. And as you said, yeah, I've been around for quite a while. I'm actually celebrating my 5th anniversary this year for Wargaming, and I had an interesting start in Wargaming and World of Warships in general, because I started playing this year right with the start of the closed beta, when you were able to get your hands on the Yubari and kind of buy your way into it, because I saw it on streams. And there was for me already a good start into the game, being able to see people play it. And I was just a regular player for quite a while, big forumite. I love being on the forums, and I actually got I got into streaming myself because I got accused of cheating in the game.
That's right.
And and the only way for me to prove that I'm not cheating, I was told that I have to stream. So I actually did that because I thought, why not? It's probably the easiest way to actually do it. And I did enjoy it a lot, so I just continued doing it. And it was a really, really fun experience to stream for 2-3 people in the beginning with a really bad microphone.
I've been there. I know what that's like. Yeah.
It was a rough start, but it was fun. So I just kept doing it to just share my gameplay experience, and it went up quite quickly. And Mr. Conway actually approached me to become a community contributor back in early, when was it, 2016, and invited me also after a few weeks to the infamous show match of World of Warships at the World of Tanks Grand League Finals, with the first official broadcast of at least a show match, which was not very fun to watch, to be honest. But it was the first attempt at a competitive World of Warships match. And that's how I got to meet the guys and started thinking about actually applying for a job. And Conway told me they're looking for somebody. And then one thing led to the other, and I joined the company. And now I've been working here for 5 years.
So quickly, most people who watch Twitch, watch the World of Warships channel, have probably seen you and Mr. Conway, two of the most familiar faces, often doing, especially for our audience, since you do the Twitch stream in English. Are you the smart, funny, good-looking one, or the other one? I'm just trying to clarify for our audience so they could tell that the twins apart.
Yes. I'm the one with the beard. And apparently with the better hair. That's my experience from the last few weeks and chat interaction, that I do get the better haircut. So I'll just take that one.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, are you the one with the beard or the hair? So anyone who doesn't know who we're talking about, who we're talking to right now, that should clear it up.
And part of the reason Boggsy and I wanted to do this podcast is because again, there's often people talking about new things they don't like, or how CVs are a common complaint. And if you go back to the beginning and look at some of the things that were in the game, I would argue that we've had quite a bit of quality of life improvement. I guess maybe we could start with the RTS CVs as being one of the more controversial things. For those of you who were not around before the CV rework, CVs used to be able to bunch all of their squads together to strike and drop all of their squads upon you at once with torpedoes, bombs. They could cross-drop you with torps. They could stay hovering over your ships after they dropped. Now they drop and it disappears. Midway had jets at one time. There's been quite a few improvements there, huh?
Absolutely. I have very vivid memories from that time, because I was just starting to play. Closed beta was just over, and in closed beta for me, it was just about getting a hang of the game, because even back then, learning the mechanics takes quite a bit of time. And then when all of the stats got reset, I thought okay, now's the time when I can be a bit better. And you suddenly had to face a +-3 matchmaking with no mirror matchmaking for CVs at all. And back then we had full strike setups without the necessity to actually bring fighters. So you could have different loadouts for the different CVs. And for example, Hakurio had a really, really nasty strike setup. And you, like my first line that I personally went for was the American battleship line. So you're sitting there in your Colorado, like pushing that ship to go towards 20 knots and towards the enemy, and you see the Hakurio coming towards you, and you could basically just decide, like, do I want to get nuked out of the match from the left or from the right? Because that's all I can do in terms of dodging, and you go back to port. And that was, for me at least, a very horrible experience in the beginning because you felt so helpless.
Right. I mean, for those of you who don't know, we call it RTS CVs because the way the CV was played was essentially like a real-time strategy game. You were essentially looking at a map view. You're looking at the map from the top down, and you've got your squads. All of your squads can be in the air at the same time, by the way. All of your planes can literally be in the air at the same time, and you can drop a single target with every single plane that you have all at once. There is I don't know where it originated, but there is a GIF that will sometimes circulate around, Reddit or the forums or Discords, which is essentially, I think it's a Yamato. It's a Yamato at full health being double dive bombed, double torpedoed. It goes from full health to 0 in a single strike because that's how much power you could put out. But it wasn't just that. The planes themselves didn't regenerate. So a carrier could it was so min-max. A carrier could strike something and kill it automatically like that, but if it lost all of its planes, it would be completely inert for the remainder of the match. It was very polarizing, to the point where, well, clearly there was a rework.
Well, and Boggsy, Chris mentioned it quickly. Do you remember the time where you could drop into a game and the enemy team would have a CV and your team had none?
I'm going to be honest, I actually don't remember that. I've been playing a little over 3 years. I think I started in 2018. I started when RTS CVs were still a thing. I think when I started, the first line that I remember being released was British destroyers, I think. I think that was the first line that got released after I started playing, was British destroyers.
Yeah, it was not a fun time, and as you mentioned, with being able to completely deplane CVs,
yeah,
there was such a thing as air superiority build. So Bo, Ryoju, you would just build it strictly to shoot down the enemy planes and basically do nothing else for your team.
It was nuts because you could take, like, there were 3 types. There was torpedoes, dive bombers, and then fighters. That was your third squadron. It wasn't rocket planes, it was fighters. And the fighters could specifically go after other planes, other groups of planes. And so you could deplane an enemy CV within the first couple minutes if you were good. And then the other CV is just like, I guess I'm just a target now. I'm just HP on the board. That's all. All I can do is try to distract an enemy boat from shooting at one of my other boats that still has a function. So, Chris, can I you may not know all of the answers to this, but, like, can you speak a little tiny bit about, like, what were some of the internal conversations about, reworking the CVs? Because that's a huge undertaking to completely change the gameplay style of an entire class of boats.
Well, it's a very difficult question because when I joined, a lot of the changes that had been made to the RTS CVs were already done. So, for example, when we talked about the aspect of, like, no mirror matchmaking, that was already fixed before I joined Wargaming. And I think it was one of the most important things, that you would always have a CV on the enemy team and on your team to kind of fight each other, especially with air superiority builds.
Right.
I remember that I personally, because back in those days, we sometimes didn't have the best mission designs, and you would have, for example, missions to kill planes, and then I would pick my Bogue and try to just go for air superiority build, shoot down some planes. And because the enemy CV could see when in the loading screen what kind of loadout you had if you paid attention to the bars, and if they saw that, oh, it's an air superiority Bogue, I'll just leave the match. And you had 0 planes to shoot down.
Oh, God.
It was a horrible experience. So yeah, these changes made it already into the game before I joined. But the big difference that we have to current CV system is that back then the impact of CVs was much higher on the battle. I know that they're still very impactful these days, but back then, having a decent CV player meant a significant boost in terms of win rate, just having him with you. I know this because I also played competitive before I joined the World of Warships team, and it was just a different world, in my opinion, in how impactful CVs were. And that also means the skill gap was super big in terms of like having like a bad CV player on your team meant you had a significantly lower chance of winning the match, no matter what you did. So this was something that the team was already looking into. But changing the RTS system was very, very difficult because of the way the system worked. For example, initially the CVs were able to deploy no fighters, just go for a pure strike setup, just go for like max damage, try to avoid the enemy fighters as much as possible in the AA bubbles, and just go for max striking. And at some point, all CVs were forced to actually bring at least a certain amount of fighters to kind of force them to not just go for damage, and also to avoid that players would say, hey, let's not bother with each other and just go for striking as much as we can.
Right.
Because that's what they wanted to do. And yeah, so the CV rework and the work beforehand took several years, actually, because the team was internally brainstorming a lot of different approaches to how can we actually fix RTS CVs until they realized that we won't be able to fix RTS. First of all, it's very detached from the actual game in a sense of you play on the map. You zoom in, but it's just top down. It's mostly about clicking. You control several squadrons at the same time, but it doesn't really have much to do with the game itself in how you would play regular artillery ships, right? And so the decision was made at some point to say, okay, we're not going to use the old system. We have to find something different where we can approach it from a different angle, and where you have more control within the regular controls of the game, but you also removed the aspect of having several squadrons at the same time that you have to control this. So yeah, it was a long process, and unfortunately, we decided to rush it a bit. It was not a good decision. Like in retrospect, hindsight is always 2020, right? But you don't want to drag it out too much as well. That's what we thought back then, and we thought it's going to be easier to fix than it actually was.
Wargaming and Russian, is that it? They were Russian.
Play on words.
Wow.
There was two things that you touched on that I just want to comment on. One of them was the way missions have changed, because you talked about how there used to be missions just to shoot down planes. A lot of our members may not remember, listeners may not remember, there were a lot of missions that had weird things to them that like just messed up the meta for a week or two, because people were strictly looking to shoot down planes, or they were just looking to start fires, or just looking to do torpedoes. And I think the way the missions are today, where there's a variety of things, there's groups of missions you can work on, for instance, for the dockyard, that's a nice improvement as well that I don't think we talked about in take one. That
take one, what are you talking about? What do you mean?
A friend of ours nuked for us. But the other thing you talked about was competitive and CVs. And the first COTS experience that my group, the Killsteel group, had, we were in, I think it was COTS 7. And the day before, our CV player was not going to be able to be there. So we went searching high and low. And at the time, there was a clan called Han that was run by a good buddy and a guy that's in Killsteel now, Torino. And we reached out and basically got their CV player to come merc for us in COTS and play, and we did pretty well. But our second round in COTS, our enemy forfeited because it was a pretty notorious thing where they came in and they didn't have a CV, and they played a game or two and realized they simply could not win without a CV, so they quit and just didn't play the rest of the tournament. So that was a big deal with the CVs and the way that it would imbalance things. There's another thing too, the matchmaking. So Chris, could you explain for our friends how the matchmaking used to work and how you used to be able to division with people of other tiers?
Oh yes. But before I get into this, I have a question for you, because I just remembered when we talked about missions. Do you remember a certain mission? I think it was in 2016 that required you to kill specifically Russian ships.
Yes.
That was for me like first Arpeggio collaboration, and for you to be able to get to one of the Miyokos, I forgot which one it was. I think it was the Nachi.
I have 73
One of the
Miyokos,
Miyokos.
FYI.
Yes, and you had to get like, I think it was, I forgot the number of ships you had to kill, but there were only Soviet cruisers back then in the game. So people were fighting for like who's going to get the kill shot on that ship because they needed it for that specific mission. And it was really bad design, and I'm very happy that we got away from this. But this is like the one mission when we talk about like bad mission design to like, let's not do this again.
Do you know how I gamed that mission? I believe it was that one. Couldn't you do those in co-op?
I think so.
Me and some of my clanmates, we would go in 3 Russian cruisers together in a division in co-op so that we knew there would be Russian cruisers on the other side.
Oh.
Clever. Yeah, I didn't think about this back then. I just went into randoms and tried to just, get it that way. But talking about divisioning up, back in the day, we were able to division up with any tier possible. So you could take a tier 1, a tier 2 ship, you could division up with a tier 10. And because matchmaking always looks at the highest tier in the division, you would then end up in that battle. For example, let's say you would do a tier 2 plus tier 10, you would end up in a tier 10 battle because that's what the matchmaker takes. And we had quite a bit of failed divisions where people would just want to play with friends or want to try something silly and just, drag them like 1 or 2 people in completely different tiers. And you see this in the matchup and you're like, great, this is going to be a very big uphill battle.
Umakazi was the big one that people would div with. Yeah, because the torps were longer than the spotting range. There wasn't much radar in the game at the time. It might have just been Des Moines, or just 1 or 2 others. And so they would just go around spamming torps at the other battleship, get floods. Even if it wasn't, damages weren't huge on the torps themselves, you could get floods, and once you got through the damage con and they couldn't repair them, they would just flood, and floods were a lot worse back then.
Floods were way worse. They're not. A flood is essentially equivalent now to a fire, except it also slows you down. It slows your boat down. But Chris, floods used to be significantly more damaging.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the old floods took so much of your HP down, and that's why. I mean, you still have this approach when new people join the game, and you try to teach them, especially when playing battleships or large cruisers, that you don't repair the first fire unless you're sure you're not going to be set on fire again, because you'll only get like a second and third fire right after, and you're going to regret it. But back then, you also had to think about the floods, because not only would you take a huge amount, I think it was we could lose up, I think, to like 40% of your HP with the flooding. And you were slowed down by like 50%. So you were sitting there, and like once you had the flooding, it's like, I'm in big trouble. I have to repair this as quickly as possible. And I cannot really get out of this because my ship is significantly worse in terms of turning out and running away. So yeah, flooding was a much, much bigger issue back then.
And the best part, Boggsy, you probably don't remember this, but you could get floods from things other than torpedoes.
This predates my involvement in warships, but yeah, the word around the campfire is that I think, stop me if I'm wrong, Borla and Chris, but you could get floods on a boat if your shells penetrated below or at the waterline, right?
Yeah, it was common when battleships would do drive-bys, within a couple kilometers, and if the guns could get down far enough and you put a hole in the ship below the waterline, it would flood.
I mean, it's worth pointing out that you can't underestimate how significant a flood used to be. Like Crysantos said, it was like 40% of your HP would go if you let a flood go the entire time. Now a flood is more or less equivalent to a fire. You can only have 2 of them, and it slows your ship down. But so along with that, DDs used to have citadels. Chris, was this only during alpha and beta, or did this make it into whatever came after the alpha and beta?
So I don't remember this at all. So it must have been before, at least before CPT. I've seen some videos from like alpha mechanics, and that's of course when crazy things are being tested, or when like
Right.
you have to figure out mechanics, like what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. And I think it's very good that the destroyers don't have citadels anymore, and that you cannot really score them, even with, for example, something like a German destroyer, right? But if you think about how damage mechanics work for DDs, not only don't they have citadels anymore, it is also removed that you can deal full penetrations on DDs, which was a very specific mechanic and something that very good players, or I mean, most players, then once they figured out how this works, would try to use on DDs, waiting for them to angle in the proper way so you can actually get full damage.
Right.
I can remember, especially in a boat like the Montana, if you fired AP at a gearing or something that was turning at that angle, you could just take massive amounts of health, 14k plus out of a DD in one salvo. Before we move on from the matchmaking, I want to mention to our listeners, think about seeing tier 10s and a tier 7.
Yeah. Like,
The
imagine your
module
Nelson.
different. Yeah.
Imagine your Nelson is going up against a Yamato. Because that happened a lot.
So when you think about the modules that get added as you go up, you think about the amount of radar that gets added at the higher tiers. It isn't always fun being in a tier 8 against a tier 10 or a tier 6 against a tier 8. But matchmaking, when it was instead of plus and minus 2 tiers, when it was plus and minus 3 tiers, that just shrinking it that one plus and minus makes a huge quality of life difference.
Yeah, not only that. If you think about how the game used to work and how it works right now, it also applies to, for example, mid tiers and lower tiers, where you would then see, I don't know, like let's say you're a tier 5 and you would see like a tier 8 ship, and the different thresholds within the game where you have like certain jumps, like from tier 7 to tier 8, for example, with having additional upgrades. And you would have to face that. And it was also before we made adjustments to the matchmaker, that you would have a maximum amount of battles on a specific tier where you would be the bottom tier ship. Because that's some feedback that we got, especially like in 2016, 17, 18, when more and more ships actually and more players actually arrived on top tiers and would play on tier 9, tier 10. The kind of like the meta where people would play shifted upwards, and a lot of the people who had, like, for example, their favorite ships on tier 8 with premium ships would constantly be up tiered. And we introduced a mechanism where you would be there's an algorithm that limits the amount of times you would be up tiered. So on tier 8, it's roughly 40% of the times you can get up tiered maximum. So you would still have 60% of battles where you're either on the same tier or you're actually top tier. And that wasn't the case back then. So you not only had like, plus minus 3, but you might end up in a row of matches where you're the minus 3.
Are you saying that all those kamikaze games that I played against tier 2 don't count?
They do count, but to hell.
Well, so I mean, going along with the with the non-mirrored matchmaking, the fail divs, the fact that matchmaking used to be +3 -3 rather than +2 -2 as it is now. One of the things is that people might not recall is that there are some ships that are currently in the game at certain tiers that used to be at radically different tiers. The one that always pops into mind for me was that the Cleveland, as you see it now at tier 8 in the American Light Cruiser branch, used to be a tier 6 and was pretty much the same, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was. It's a very similar ship, and it was very broken. I have to admit that I played a lot of battles in the Cleveland. It's still one of my all-time favorites, I would say. I actually used to start every day when I would play World of Warships. I would start my day by playing one battle in the Cleveland. And not only was the Cleveland super, super strong in itself, the commander skills changed, of course, over the years very much. And when you would be playing the Cleveland, let's say, for example, 2016, you would have skills like BFT and AFT giving you a boost to the 150 millimeter guns. So you would be able to get longer range plus faster reload on the Cleveland, and you would meet, also like tier 4s, for example.
I'm sorry.
Can you imagine just like something like a Kuma, and you're like, hey,
Yeah.
goodbye.
Sucks to be a South Carolina, right?
The old Cleveland was glorious. It really, really was at tier 6. It was a little disgusting.
It was.
Yes, but I mean, that's the thing. It was a really fun ship, and even after all of the changes that were applied to the game, before the branch split actually happened for American cruisers, it was still one of the best cruisers in the game, and still one of my favorites.
Well, so speaking of cruisers as well, those of you might be familiar with a certain ship in testing called the Zhao. Now, it's difficult to talk about the Zhao because test boats, you're not supposed to talk about test boats, but I think we can make an exception.
Please be careful with the NDA.
With the NDA
around
the Zhao?
I want to get into trouble.
Okay, I don't want to get in trouble either. But the Zhao, I mean, I feel like we can talk about, since the Zhao has been in testing for 5 years, right? Something like that.
Like 6.
6 years. We could say that the Zhao has gone through some changes as well. And one thing you guys might not recall is that the Zhao was notorious for something called stealth firing. So Borla, what exactly was stealth firing?
So everybody is familiar with the mechanic today that if you fire your guns, if anything is in a straight line of sight within range of your guns, you get spotted. It's called gun bloom, right? So even if your detection is 12, but your guns go to 16, when you fire, everybody within 16 km that's not blocked by an island or smoke can see you. There used to be no such thing as gun bloom in that sense. So if your detection was 12 and your guns went to 16, you could just fire with impunity. So there were many, many boats out there that could fire beyond the range of what you could see, and there was really no counterplay other than run away or charge them. So some of the boats, like a Cabaros was a good one. The Zhao was a good one. Some of the USDDs, you could just spam HE at people, and they would have to. You could chase them. Many of them had several 100-meter or even kilometer ranges where you could just spam away and not be spotted.
Yeah, I mean, actually, it did work with Gunbloom, but the mechanic was a bit more complicated than it is these days. So you had your base concealment of your ship, and then based on the caliber of your guns.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. There
would be a specific bloom of additional detectability based on your caliber of guns. So if you would be creative and you took something like the Biskavica, which is, I think, for me, old favorite ship that I would love to play on tier 7, especially in ranked. You could build it if you use your skills and your upgrades properly. If you use AFT, you could basically extend the range over the spotting range that you would have with the regular concealment plus the gun bloom. And so you could sit there, let's say you sit there at 14 kilometers distance of a battleship, and you would only be detected, let's say 12.3 kilometers. There's 1.7 kilometers where you can just fire unless there's anything in between that could spot you, and the enemy can do nothing about it. I mean, there were some hilarious ships like the Mogami or Biskavica, I think, would be probably the two most notorious ships that were known for this in the smaller gun configuration, that would just be able to do this. And it's a super frustrating mechanic. On the one hand, I'm a bit sad that it's gone, because it gave you something to work with that is quite unique to certain ships. But on the other hand, if you're on the receiving side of this, it's just frustrating. You would have a gearing, just farming you down, and you sit there in your Montana, and there's nothing you can do because you won't catch up to him.
Anyone who's been frustrated by a flamethrower, like a Smolensk or something like that, a Haragumo, a Smolensk, whatever, sitting in smoke, constantly shooting at you, lighting you on fire. You're like, this is so frustrating because I can't do anything about it. Imagine if they're not even in smoke and they're still doing the same thing to you.
Yeah, no, thanks for correcting me, Chris. It was the caliber of the guns. The other thing, Boggsy, you're talking about with smoke, most people today that are listening may not remember the gunfire penalty in smoke was nothing like it is today. It used to be was it 2 or did it go out to 3? Unless you had there was the module where you could detect things from twice as far away. But essentially, a battleship could sit in smoke 3, 4, 5K away, fire its main guns, and would not be spotted.
Yes, there was a very interesting mechanic. Let me put it this way. And also, like, just thinking back when playing games back then, I would play something like Kutuzov, and you just ask your destroyer who's in front of you, is like, hey, if you drop a smoke in front of me, I'll just be right there, right next to you in the cap, and you spot, and we'll just kill it together because I'm not going to be spotted because you have only 2 kilometers of spotting range, so you can farm anything unless it comes into that range. And very few ships back then would mount that module that gives you 50% assured detection range, so you would be spotted at 3 kilometers. Even then, 3 kilometers is really close, right? So it was a really bad mechanic, and the first competitive matches that we had, like the first iterations of King of the Sea, were notorious for these smoke, snail trains of like DDs just laying the smoke. There were way fewer ships with radar in the game as well. So you would have, battleships just parked in front of each other a few kilometers away, just waiting for something to get spotted. And then they could just fire without any penalty because you would have to be super close.
Nothing could see you.
Wanted to take exactly. Nobody wanted to take that risk. So there was a really, really I would call it a bad mechanic, of course, because it's not very good if you can park a battleship in a smoke and you would have to drive basically next to it to be able to spot it when it's shooting its 460 millimeter guns right next to you.
The biggest guns ever mounted on a battleship in real life ever. And you're 3 kilometers away in smoke and it's like, what was that noise? Did anybody hear anything? I can't see it. That's ridiculous.
Exactly. And you wouldn't really know what's sitting inside of that smoke. Because radar was not that prominent. It would work, the same way, of course, on like mid-tier. So even radar would not be available if you would play on like tier 5, tier 6. You would have to push into hydro range. So yeah, there was.
And there was less hydro back then too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you didn't have things like these days. A lot of the mods were integrated into the game. So smoke boundaries, like I'm a player who doesn't really play with a lot of mods. I used to take things like the damage counter and the smoke boundaries mod because it was so helpful to know whether you're actually in your smoke still and when you would slip out of it. And these days you can see it even on the water, right, where the smoke boundaries are. And because you have like the last known position, you can kind of guesstimate where certain ships, if they misplayed, you could at least have a chance to know. But back then, no, it wasn't possible.
And you talk about the smoke boundary, there also used to be no way to tell when your smoke was going to run out, right? Unless you had one of the mods. You had to basically count down your own smoke, didn't you?
Oh, I'm not 100% sure, but I wouldn't be surprised that UI element would have been introduced later. Yes.
Yeah, I think that was you used to have to take that in Aslan's. You would lay your smoke and you'd have to look at the clock, or maybe it was other people's smoke you couldn't see when it was timing out. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But you wouldn't. Yeah,
I think it was other people.
Yeah, it was other people's smoke. But if you have a div mate or a teammate, if you're on voice comms, okay, he could tell you got 10 seconds left or whatever. But teammates, you wouldn't be able to count that down. That was not part of the UI at the time. The other thing, Boggsy, and he mentioned battleships and smoke, pounding away at each other. There used to be something that would happen often late in a match when the game was, either decided or at least the player on your team who was in a battleship or a heavy cruiser had decided that he thought the game was over. And he didn't want to pay his maintenance costs. So instead of continuing the match, he would run away because the maintenance, or what we today call service costs in a battle, used to be calculated based on what happened in that battle. So if your ship sunk or you took a lot of damage, it was more expensive to play that match.
Yep.
What do you think about that?
Well, so everybody knows that when you bring a boat into battle, it costs a certain amount of credits. It's this the repair cost or the service cost, whatever you want to call it. It used to be it's just a flat rate, and it's tied to your tier. And then of course premium ships Premium ships have generally a lower service cost, for the purpose of helping you gain credits. So one of the things that, like Borla was saying, it used to be that your service cost was tied to how much damage you took or whether you were sunk in the match. So I think we can all imagine, even with just a tiny amount of thought, what that incentivizes a player to do, which is avoid damage, which means they don't want to push in, they don't want to take unnecessary damage, so they're going to be very cautious. It's, to me, a mechanic that I'm really glad they just made it a flat cost, because now people don't consider it and they go, I'm happy to take a little damage to make sure that my team wins. It sort of reminds me of the Deadeye thing, where you would lose your Deadeye back when Deadeye was a thing during the Commander rework. You would lose your Deadeye bonus if something was spotted in your standard detection range. So it encouraged players to sit back away from the battle. I don't know if there's a word for it, but it's an incentive it's a negative incentive that I thought is not good for how the game feels.
Just think about how frustrating it is in a close game today, where you get someone who is in a battleship and sits at the back with max HP, and they're missing shots because they're beyond their effective range, or at least their personal skill range, and that's frustrating enough. Now imagine if you were like, hey, in the Yami, can you move up? And he types in chat, I don't have the credits. I'm trying not to go broke.
I'm trying to save the credits, bruh.
Because that happened.
Oh, God. I can't even imagine. Like, I don't even remember that. I think that was pre-me, to be honest with you guys. But
it was quite a while ago.
Yeah, I think it was changed like in 2017, and that's where like one of the more frustrating aspects for me in my job sometimes is that a lot of people don't read, because I know we have a lot of updates, a lot of changes are happening all the time, and it's very easy to miss something like, okay, you don't have to pay this maintenance cost anymore for your ship based on the damage, so they would still play like this even though it was removed, because they wouldn't check like detailed report after battle. Yeah, no, but I can understand where it's coming from, but you would have people then still saying like, hey, I'm not pushing forward because of this, and you're telling them like, it's not the case anymore. You can do it, buddy. You can push. It's fine. You are not going to get penalized by the game for being pushy. I mean, hopefully you will learn sooner or later that it's not good to just YOLO in, because you're not going to get a lot of credits out of it, but at least there's no negative aspect for you for taking more damage and having to pay extra.
And that's a really fine line for a game developer, I feel like. It's like, hey, we want people to be punished in a way for being reckless and stupid and playing poorly. We want to reward people for playing well, for learning, and for getting better and showing competence. So there's such a strange fine line between what kind of negative reinforcement can we put in to help people get better without punishing everyone by creating an incentive to avoid damage. That's really tough to. Well, I guess it just takes work, and it takes experience, and it takes learning to figure that sort of thing out. But
while we're on this topic, I think it's also good to highlight that we used to have this aspect for repairing your ship, and by now, because I just when thinking about this topic of like credit income, one of the, in my opinion, best changes we've ever made was actually removing premium consumables and making them just standardized. Because for me as a player, it took me a while to realize that, hey, I would always mount premium consumables just because it will give me an edge in the battle, which means I will probably perform better, which means I will get more credits, and it's probably going to offset the cost of my premium consumables. But if you're, for example, a free-to-play player and you simply don't have the credits to be able to afford this, you would be in a situation where you couldn't go for like a full premium consumable setup, and you would not be able to repair your fire as quickly. You would not be able to heal that quickly, or you might even run out of a heal, right?
Yeah.
To be in that situation was not a good system. And I mean, we're a free-to-play game and we have to monetize certain aspects, but I was really happy when the decision was made to say, hey, you know what, this aspect is free for everybody. You don't have to make a decision whether you're going to take the premium consumable, but you can just select what you want. You don't have to pay extra for receiving, extra damage. It's just about go for the best setup, go and play, and you're gonna have like an equal footing in the game,
Yeah.
a level playing field.
So, I mean, for those of you who don't know, because I feel like it was a change that happened in maybe 2019, maybe 20. It couldn't have been 2020. It had to be late 2019, I think. The consumables that you use, the repair party, the damage control, the speed boost,
hydro radar, all of them,
everything. It used to be not what we have now. It used to be that there was a base level of it, and then there was a premium version that you could pay for with credits. And I mean, if you're somebody who likes to optimize and play at your maximum efficiency, it was sort of a no-brainer. We'll take the premium consumables. But then imagine, like, some boats have only one or two consumables, right? Like, I'm thinking right now of the difference between the French battleships and the French cruisers is the one that always sticks out to me. So, like, a Republic has the damage control party, the DCP, which puts out fires and floods. It has the heal, which gives you HP back, and then it has a speed boost. That's 3, right? But the French cruisers have like 5 or 6, I think, sometimes. So if you wanted to run a French cruiser at optimal playability, you're spending like 120,000 credits alone on just the consumables. And it was nuts. I didn't even want to play the French cruisers because I'm one of those weird people where, like, I almost feel wrong if I'm playing it not optimized. So I would just...
Didn't you get one more use of each of those consumables? So for instance,
yes.
It changed the amount of time certain things operated and one more use, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think it was like I think for the damage control party, I think it was a 20 seconds difference. So you can imagine what kind of difference that makes in terms of repairing a fire or a flood, as we talked earlier about. Having for the repair party an extra heal makes, of course, also a huge difference. Being able to get those percentages back on your HP and being able to survive longer will mean that you get to fight longer, you get to deal more damage, you get to maybe cap. All of these aspects made a significant difference, and you would have to make the decision as a player. Am I confident in my next match that I'm going to make that money back on the consumables, especially if you're not like a super unicum, right? We here are very good players, but the average player might not be able to get a very high consistent base XP score every match and get hundreds of thousands of credits. But 20k, because I think the price was 22.5k per consumable, might make a huge difference, especially if you want to play something like a Wooster. You have all the consumables in the world, and have to decide which ones you're going to take.
Another big quality of life improvement that was made. Let me ask you this, Boggsy. Do you have things set up on your ships, the ones you don't have permanent camos on? Mm-hmm. Do you have it set up where it automatically applies the camo your next battle, or do you go in and click it every single battle?
On almost all of my boats, I have it so that it automatically reloads. There have been times before where I didn't, but generally speaking, I sort of go, okay, on this boat, I'm trying to grind the captain, so I'll put a camo on it that is specifically designed for maximizing the amount of captain experience I get, or maybe this is a free XP boat. I have a thing, but yeah, I generally sort of keep it that way. Why?
Yeah.
Did something used to be different?
Same. Yeah, I do the same. And there's some camos that I have a bunch of, like the Victory or Lunar Warrior, so I'll use those a lot, right, on my ships if I'm just going to play. But let's say I'm specifically trying to grind some free XP, and so my boat's in port, it has the Lunar Warrior, and I want to use something like a Triumphant for free XP, or maybe one of the special camos like Spring Sky. It used to be, if you changed your camo in port from one camo to another, the camo that you went away from, you lost out of your inventory. You could never use it again, because you understand when you paint a ship, you can't take the paint back.
You can't take the paint back. I mean, that's a pretty good like logic thing, I want to say. But when it comes to like, well, this isn't, that's realistic, let's say that, but it's like, right, but this is an arcade game. I don't need it to be that realistic. Just give me the goddamn paint back.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to also keep in mind that back then, camos were not that common. When the game was launched, you would have not even like the special camos that would give you economic boosters unless you played something like ranked, and was pretty hard to usually get your hands on them. By now, you get them for most of the missions, right? You can get them from containers, and there are lots of different ways how you can obtain camos. But back then, a camo it really meant a lot. It took you a longer time to get to higher tiers, and losing a camo like that by just making a mistake of trying to mount another one, that cost you, especially nerfs.
Yeah. Speaking of other things that used to be permanent, or maybe, sorry, that was a terrible segue. What I'm trying to say is that...
Hey, we could just delete this podcast and start over, Boggsy.
Could we? That's a really good idea.
Third time's a charm,
Third time's a charm. Like, I think we might finally see the not nice Crysantos come out if I ruin this for a second time. Like, I think we might actually break him. Okay, so I'm gonna do the unthinkable, and I'm gonna reference World of Tanks for a second. So in World of Tanks, which I used to play, World of Tanks is actually how I got into World of Warships. I watched streamers and I watched YouTubers who made content for tanks, which I played, and they started playing this game called World of Warships, and I was like, oh, that's awesome! So I started playing World of Warships because of that, and I have not gone back to tanks, to be completely honest with you, because when I go back now, I suck at it. But I have something like 17,000 battles in World of Tanks. It was a problem. So World of Tanks has a thing in it where oftentimes the commander skills you take don't actually take effect. You have to train up your commander. It's not like you just take the skill and you have the skill. Oftentimes you have to sort of... There's a threshold, so like you have to reach for the skill to be activated. So one of those skills, arguably the single most important skill that your commanders can take in World of Tanks, is called Sixth Sense. And it's funny, because you folks in World of Warships might be familiar with it. It's this little light bulb that pops up and says, hey, you've been detected. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Borla, do we see that in World of Warships?
We do now. You used to have to take a captain skill for it.
It had to be a skill.
Yes.
So, if any of you have ever been driving your DD, seen a little bulb that pops up and goes, you've been detected, and you go, oh crap! That used to be a skill you had to take, just like World of Tanks, until it became, well, I guess just what we'd say, standard? Obligatory? What would you call it? Do you remember when that was, Crysantos?
Oh god. I would say around 2017, maybe. I would have to say, because I think it came when we made some changes to the commander skill system, and we had the huge discussions about radio. What was it called?
RPF.
RPF, thank you. Because then we shuffled some skills around, and that one became just a regular feature for every ship. But I agree that it was a great change, because back then, if you would not have it skilled, or if you would be retraining your commander, because the way commander skills worked was, if you're retraining your commander, the skills would operate only at 50%. That means if it's an active or not active skill, it's deactivated. So you would have to basically wait for enemies to shoot you, or pay very close attention to the match and know your detectability range to know, like, oh no, I'm going to be in trouble here, and I need to move away. And you know how it is in a DD when you realize that 10-20 seconds too late.
Well, I see.
My clan won't let me play DDs, so I have no idea what you're talking about.
I am one of the rare guys, I think, that's played this game as long as I have, and plays as much clan battles and COTS and other things as I have, and still likes to play some low tier games every now and then. And so I have a 239,545 HP damage kamikaze game that argues that Sixth Sense should still be a skill that those battleship captains should have to take. Because let me tell you, it was fun. It was fun playing the kamikaze back then and being able to spam those torps and them not even realize they were spotted.
Jeez. God, I can't, like, I'm literally having slight flashback trauma right now just thinking of some of the things that, like, at the time I didn't know it was an issue. You know, now things are so much, it's one of those weird things where, like, when you look back on how things used to be, it's so much easier to remember, you know, something that you thought was good that's no longer there and be upset about it. But it's like, oh my god, do you realize how many, like, quality of life and gameplay quality of life is what I want to say, changes have been made that, like, I barely even remember anymore, because it just sort of is like, oh well, this is this, I take this for granted now. To that end, Bastion mode. Let's talk about game modes that have come and gone, and let's start with Bastion mode. Now, Crysantos, I want to just say that, like, Bastion mode predates me. I didn't even know what Bastion mode was. So when you
didn't miss much.
So when I was preparing for this podcast the first time, which was like over a month ago, because I'm an idiot, I actually went to.
What do you mean? What do you mean the first time?
The first time? Have you had a sense of deja vu this entire time? Because
it seems familiar.
Because I'm an idiot. I went to a couple of Discords for some clans that have been around for quite a while, and I said, guys, I'm going to be talking with Crysantos about the Ghosts of Warships Past. What are some things from the past that used to be in the game? And the one that kept coming up was Bastion mode. So let's ask Crysantos to do this first. What was Bastion mode, and why is it not in the game anymore?
Sure, happy to talk about this one. So Bastion mode was a specific version of a map where you would have a fortress as part of a cap zone, or right next to a cap zone, that would be activated and work for a team once you cap that cap zone. So that means, hey, for example, you're a destroyer, you have a map like Atlantic, you'd go into the B cap, you cap the map, and you cap the cap, and as soon as it's yours, it would target any spotted ship, and it would also spot in a certain range the enemy ships and would shoot them. And when I mean shoot them, I mean nuke them, especially when it comes to destroyers, because first of all, the fortress had a lot of HP. The enemy team would have to disable it to stop it shooting, which means they would have to actually use their resources, instead of shooting at enemy ships, to shoot like an NPC building.
And get spotted while they're shooting.
Exactly, get spotted while they're shooting. And the Bastion was very accurate, and you would lose a lot of HP when it hit you. So it was kind of like doubling down on the advantage you would have by being in a cap zone and taking it for your team. And there was a very frustrating element for a lot of players. It was something new to try, and kind of, having like a different approach to domination mode and putting more emphasis, or even more emphasis, on the cap zones. But it made it so difficult for a team that is already struggling to get back into the caps to be able to recap them, because you not only have to worry about getting the cap back, but to fight this stupid Bastion. So we tried to rework it for several months, and then at some point we just realized that there's no way we can adjust this without fixing the core issue of that. Hey, you have the cap, and it gives you an advantage, and this will only make the advantage stronger. So I think it took us like 6 to 7 months, I would say, to make the decision to completely remove it. So that's why, if you haven't played during that time, you don't know this mode, and I think you will probably never get to meet it again. But it was like a different mechanic.
So I would say, there's a few game modes that are less popular than others, and sometimes, especially on certain maps, Epicenter with a storm, or as the storm moves across. Like, next time you drop into one of those and you're not really happy about it, just be glad the storm isn't shooting at you.
It's actually an interesting idea that, lightning should strike your ship. Yeah, but no, it's something that I feel like I personally really like when we get to introduce new modes, because it changes a bit, like the everyday experience that you have, and gives you variety in terms of gameplay. But that wasn't good variety, and I personally felt it to be quite frustrating if you have to play not just against the enemy team, sometimes part of your team, and then also against the Bastion.
There's a video. I've only seen one video of Bastion mode, but there was a Zhao attempting to go into. I forget who it was, but there's a Zhao attempting to go into a cap that's held by the enemy, which means it's defended by the fort. It's a it's like you were saying. It's an NPC. It's a PC enemy. It's a fort sitting there, and it just dumpsters him. And the Zhao, I think he starts with, I forget how much HP a Zhao can have. It's like 38,000. It's very low. He ends up with like 12,000 HP left after he caps it, and the fort's like, oh, I guess you're the man now. Let's get to work. And it's like, Jesus. I mean, like, it's just it's rough, man. But speaking of other modes, like Bastion mode was something akin to randoms for the most part. It was sort of like randoms with a non-player controlled fort guarding your cap zones for you. There've been a whole bunch of game modes that have come and gone throughout the years. I think it's fair to say that oftentimes those game modes sort of serve as like test beds for new game mechanics that Wargaming wants to put into or is thinking of putting into the game. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
Yes, absolutely. It's the best way to try something crazy without impacting regular gameplay.
Without pissing people off?
Exactly. That's what it is, right? Because if you want to try something very different, people are way more open to trying it in the mode where their stats don't count, where it doesn't really affect them in a meaningful way. And they can just return to their regular game modes without the feeling of like, oh no, this is waiting for me there. So this is why a lot of the event modes that we have might later on have some impact on, mechanics, or at least it gives us the chance to play around with some stuff and see how it works without going through the experience of Bastion mode. Because just for context, you could not select whether you want to play in Bastion mode or not. It was just part of the map rotation, and sometimes you would end up on a Bastion map mode. And there was nothing you could really do about this. So I think it's much better to be able to do this either in crazy modes or at least in different seasons, as you would have, for example, Arms Race. They would be part of a specific ranked season. So you wouldn't have to interact with it in randoms, for example.
So, Boggsy.
Yeah.
I have a little over 17,000 games in the 6 years that I've played.
Okay.
So in those 17,000 games, do you know what's happened to me exactly the same number of times that I've killed an enemy ship by ramming?
I have no idea.
Finished a random game in a draw.
Oh, God.
I have 95 draws on my account.
95? Wow.
I actually have to check it for myself while you say this. How many draws? But yeah, draws have been a thing back then. Not that much anymore, but how was it for you actually ending up in draws?
Well, see, because what people don't experience today is a game where you're playing and one side's steamrolling the other or beating the other, and one person just can hold up that entire thing by staying alive. But it used to be in a standard battle, if you did not completely cap the enemy's cap or kill all 12 of the enemy's team, you did not win. So you could be, it could be 10 ships to 1, but if the time ran out and you hadn't capped or killed that last ship, you got a draw. So like early in my time playing Boggsy, like 1.5-2% of my games were draws.
Draws are so rare. They're so rare in the game, but they didn't used to be. The most significant draw that I can recall in recent memory was actually in the very first iteration of some of you listening probably know who Gaishu Isoku is. He's a CC for North America. He runs his own clan called Gaishu and Friends, and they change their name around constantly. He's an absolutely exceptional player. And at one point, I think in 2020, he started his own tournament. He's a very competent. He's a very, very competent player, very competent, intelligent person. So he actually, I think he has support from Wargaming, the company, when he does what he calls the Worship Masters Invitational, where he invites, I I think 12 of some of the best clans in internationally, and then also in the North American region, and they do a tournament. It's very unique. It's very interesting. My clan, TNG, actually was in the first iteration of it, played the very first game in the very first Warship Masters Invitational Tournament against SCCC. In the very first game, there was a draw. A perfect draw.
I had forgot all about that. I remember now.
Geishu himself and was actually commenting. He was commentating on the game and absolutely freaked out. And he's pretty reserved, I would say, in terms of his personality. He's pretty calm, but he just freaked out because when you're trying to create a tournament, you have to come up with a whole bunch of rules to govern what happens when certain things happen. And there's no limit to the scenarios that can occur. The only thing is, how likely is that to happen? So they never came up with a rule regarding what happens in a draw, because they were like, it's so mathematically improbable. And it was a perfect draw where the 2 point tickers both clicked to 1,000 at the exact same time. I mean, you can just see how rare this actually was. But it happened, what did you say, it was over 1%?
Back in the day, it used to be like, I think my numbers were somewhere between 1% and 2% of my total games. Early on were draws, because if you got in a random battle and you didn't kill the whole team or cap, it was a draw.
Right. Which clearly makes it considerably more likely. Guys, I realize we've already just passed the hour mark. Chris, I again, we appreciate you being here and donating this much of your time to chat about warships on your weekend. But I want to do 2 more things before we wrap up. And one is, I want to just go over real quick some infamous bugs that have come and gone throughout the years. And obviously we're going to have you sink a ship by the end of the podcast. So one bug that I recall specifically was not too long ago. I feel like it might have been late 2020, where Expert Marksman for an entire patch was bugged, so that your turrets turned, it was like inverse. So your turrets turned extremely fast on battleships. And that was, obviously it was patched.
That was glorious.
I think it actually, it was during King of the Seas, right?
Because I played Kremlin that COTS and I loved it.
Yes, I remember that bug.
Yeah. Do you recall any other bugs that were around for a patch or two, something like that? I mean, obviously we all know now that there's still a problem. There's still a small problem of torpedoes catching up to where they're supposed to be if your destroyer is turning. But do you remember any bugs that came and went over the years?
Oh yes, I remember that we actually had a bug, and I don't know where it exactly came from back then, but we had a bug where you would be able to score citadels because of the torpedo protection being bugged, and you were able to get like really weird citadels on ships for a few days before we were able to hotfix it. That was the one that at least stuck in my mind the most.
Literally getting citadels through the torpedo protection.
Yes.
That's glorious.
Yes.
Borland, are there any ones that you can recall?
The one that you talked about was my all-time favorite. I just remember, the Expert Marksman and those turrets turning so fast. That was just a good time. And then I believe the patch, they had to leave it because of COTS, because the last week of COTS was past the patch date. And that was some of the most fun COTS matches that I had. I think I did have a couple. I nuked a Venezia with my rear turret, and there was another. I had a couple good plays that COTS, and it was not me. It was the bug.
You were playing Shikishima in that COTS, weren't you?
I think I was I think I was mostly playing Kremlin. I may have had a Shiki game or two. I think a couple of the setups we had, I might have been Shiki too.
That's glorious. There was also there was a bug for a patch where vertical dispersion variance was removed. So your shells would still spread out horizontally, but they would all be at the same vertical plane. It's like, am I wrong in recalling that?
Oh, like I personally don't remember that, but that would be, of course, very glorious.
There was something with vertical dispersion. I think you're right. This is probably 18 months ago or so.
I think there was a bug, but it wouldn't be that it was removed, because otherwise you would have a very ridiculous amount of citadels probably.
Yeah, probably. Oh God, yeah. There was another one briefly where, and I don't remember this one, so I'm just going off my notes, where apparently water didn't impede shell velocity. So if a shot fell too low, hit the water, we all understand from physics that, of course, water is an incredibly powerful energy sink, where if something goes into water, it's why you, in Los Angeles, at least in California, on freeways, whenever there's an off-ramp off of a freeway, there's a very clear point at where the metal guardrails will meet, and it's if a car were to run into it, it would split your car in half because it's such a sharp point. So they put giant barrels of water in front of it, specifically because water acts as a really good energy sink. So if your car hits it, the energy of your car goes into the water barrels, the water disperses everywhere, and it slows your car down without doing too much damage to you. So it's the same applies to shells, to, battleship or whatever shells, where when the shell hits the water, it starts to slow down and lose energy very, very quickly. But there was one bug for a little bit where the water wouldn't actually impede the shell, so the shell would just keep going, and it would do you think maybe that was the torpedo protection bug? Like that was
might have been related to this, yeah.
Okay, so a shell could go through the water and just hit the really unprotected part of a ship under the water, because the water didn't slow it down as it does now, which we wouldn't even think about unless it suddenly started happening. We're like, why the hell am I getting citadeled constantly?
Yes.
Well, okay.
No, but thank God, like, at least, I'm sure there's some things that still haunt me at night, but at least nothing comes to mind in terms of bugs that have been around for way too long.
Right. Well, so I guess there's only two more things I want to ask. Borla, if you have anything else you want to ask of our fine guest Crysantos here, feel free, now's the time. But my first question is just, do you recall any game modes? Because I love the alternate game modes. I think my favorite was the Savage Battles, which was sort of like, it was like Thunderdome for destroyers, and it resulted in the USS Benham was available during that game mode. There were a whole bunch of Tier 10 destroyer permanent camos that were available. That was my favorite. Do you have any favorite game modes that have sort of come and gone over the past?
Are you talking? So
did we lose him?
No. The one that which one was it with the Benham? That was the one
that was Savage
with
Battles.
Like the apocalypse. So a long time ago, when Killsteel Confirmed started branching out and adding new clans, I added alt accounts to run those clans, and there was a brief period of time where I used to grind alt accounts too. I have 2 Benhams, Boggsy.
God damn it.
How?
Yeah. I have one on what is now my KSE Commander account, and I have one on my KSC Commander account.
You're such a dick.
So, I mean, I think, Chris, like, if there's anybody that deserves, something special or whatever for Wargaming, it should be somebody who ground out 2 Benhams.
Like, I know the time investment that was needed to get that, so you do deserve a medal, yes. Did you sleep during that update?
Oh, I don't sleep much. I mean, there's no time to sleep. But, I mean, you've seen what I've had to go through with Boggsy just in the one episode of the podcast you tried to do with him.
Borla's wife would wake him up in the morning and say, "Honey, wake up. You got to get another Benham. Get to work, Borla. Get another Benham. Otherwise, what are we even doing with our lives?"
So that pause where you thought you lost me was just my brain freezing, thinking about those couple months.
I mean, there have been some really fun game modes that have sort of come and gone over the years. Savage Battles was, I think, my favorite. And to me, the reason was because there was a really clear reward at the end, which was the USS Benham, which I did not get, by the way. I played a whole bunch of Savage Battles. You needed 800 Savage or whatever tokens to get the Benham from whatever pool of prizes was available. I had one more mission. I had one more game needed to play to finish the mission that got me 100 tokens that would put me over so I could get the Venom, and the entire event ended while I was doing the last battle I needed, so I couldn't get the Venom. And I will never
Oh no.
I will never forgive, and it's gonna be on my tombstone. He deserved a Venom.
Well, should have just played 10 minutes earlier.
Oh sure, Chris, blame the victim. That's good. Blame the victim. Yeah.
Time management, clearly time management.
Well, I mean, Boggsy, I got 2. I don't know why you couldn't get 1.
Damn it. Borla, do you have anything else to ask this nice man before we let him go back to his Sunday again?
No, but I'm talking about game modes. I will join the ranks of those who would love to see the bathtub mode again. I mean, there was before you started playing.
Yeah, I remember that.
But
April
for me,
Fools.
there was April Fool's mode. The graphics were super nice. It was, you were just playing, like little toy ships in a bathtub, and it was super fun to just like play it for the fun. I mean, there was actually a reward, and I think you got I think it was a signal flag or 2 signal flags per match based on the ship that you played, and you just did it for the fun. And I was streaming actually back then, and I had one of my moderators, and I kid you not, there was like a story he told me. So he was from Turkey, and he had to work, and he made a calculation of like how much time it would take him to play this and to get these flags or to buy them. And then he decided, you know what? I have a nephew that is currently on holidays, and he paid him to play that mode to farm signal flags.
Oh my god.
And I couldn't believe that somebody would do this, because for me it was just a pure fun mode. But he said, you know what, it was actually quite nice in terms of rewards. So he would do it like this. But for me it was just a super fun mode, very disconnected from the game.
Yeah.
Still using like funny game mechanics, had a lot of humor to it, and I would love to see it again. I know from development side that it's not easy. You would actually have to start from scratch, because the game moved on so much in terms of the code and the mechanics that you would basically have to start from scratch to get it back into the game. But I loved that. It was, more about fun than going for like a crazy reward like the Benham that you would want to get, but more about you just played for the fun. And that's, for me personally, something that sometimes is missing from the game, or also for players that this is a game. You want to play it, of course, for all of the things that are in the game, but most of all, it's a game for fun, and to kind of get that fun in different modes.
Right. Man, I think I recall Conway mentioning that on Thursday about someone asked him about bathtub mode, and he said, I would love to see it come back, but the reality of coding that again, given how much has changed in the game, would be prohibitive, basically. It would be fun, but it's sort of like spending a huge amount of resources on flowers that are going to die tomorrow. It's just like, come on.
And for those who don't remember the bathtub mode, because that was probably, 4 years ago? 4 years ago? It was April Fool's. I think it was 2016, April. So
was
it that long ago?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're old.
Yeah, the map was a bathtub. I think there were rubber ducks and stuff floating in. You had these little tugboats, like cartoonish tugboats that you drove. And essentially, you had torps that launched out of the nose and a little pea shooter gun, and you just went around. It was like a tier 1 or tier 2, modeled on tier 1, I think. But it was a hilarious cartoonish mode. That was a lot of fun.
I think Tanks actually did something similar when they had a mode. People had been asking the World of Tanks crew to put the Carl mortar. For those of you who don't know your history, the Carl was in World War II it was a German railgun. So it was some absurd caliber. It was a siege cannon, essentially. I can't remember. There was the Schwere Gustav, there was the Carl, and then there was the Dora. And one of them was like an 800 millimeter cannon on a railroad. It was just absurd, but I think it was used in the siege of Sevastopol, one of them. But the Carl, people were like, when are we going to get the Carl in the game? So for April Fool's, Tanks actually created a little Minecraft style game mode where you could play the Carl, this little tiny, block-looking Carl, and you'd drive around and you'd shoot blocks, and you'd blow up the blocks, and you'd shoot other Carls. It's very silly, but always a lot of fun. Those sort of game modes where you take a break from the usual and you get to play something that's different and sort of reminds you of what it is that you play every day, and reminds you of what you like and what you don't like and whatnot. So
one quick thing on those game modes, which was it a Halloween mode with the filth where you could go in and you couldn't be in a division, but people in chat would make alliances and they would, say they were going to team up, and then oftentimes backstab each other, and somebody would steal the person that they had made the agreement with. They would steal their filth and come out. Boggsy, you and I both lead pretty big clan groups on North America. The period of time where, and I don't get many complaints about my guys, right? I don't get many people DMing me or
let me get on that. I'll start making sure there are more.
yeah, we'll now. But we try to screen for guys who are not toxic in the community and all that stuff. But anyway, so I don't get many complaints. When that game mode was on, I was shots. Your guy swore to me that we had an alliance and he and I'm like, really?
No,
really?
Say it isn't so.
I'm like, you want me to go kick somebody out of a clan because they stole your filth?
That's so funny. He stole my. Excuse me, kick this guy out of your clan because he stole my filth.
Dude, it happened a lot. I probably of the 3.5 years or whatever we've run Killsteel, probably 40 to 50% of the complaints ever were about filth.
Oh my god!
Really?
For real?
I mean,
that's not her hyperbole. Like, for real.
I hope they all came from 07. I hope that they're like, hey man, toxic guy from KSC stole my filth.
Before they hated us for CVs, everybody was upset at Cable Guy and Furja. They were upset at our guys who stole filth.
I'm just teasing you, 07. Don't get your panties in a twist or anything.
But
Chris.
wait, before we move on, I wanted to say, so I come from a background of I love to play strategy games, and I used to play a lot of EVE Online for like 3 to 4 years. And EVE Online is like a super hardcore game in terms of how you play it, how much you can lose, just in terms of actual value by playing the game. And it's a super scummy place. Everybody wants to rip you off. It's about like killing and stealing, and it's a fantastic game. But it can be very frustrating. So I come from a background where you just expect people to, if there's a chance to steal some of your shit, they will do it just for the fun of it. So for me, it was like, this is absolutely hilarious. I love doing this, and I was super happy to play it on and off stream and just, like play a little bit with the role-playing aspect of like, okay, let's all do this together, and then at some point you would steal somebody's filth. But I was not surprised. Like I was really surprised by how many people took it really personally. And I think it's just, like World of Warships as a game has a different audience than EVE Online, for example, and people are not used to getting backstabbed. And there was so much salt about this. Hey, let's be friends, and then you leave the division, you sink their ship and take their stuff. That it's something that people didn't really enjoy, and we even saw this with the key battles where players were able to division up, and then at some point they could switch teams and do some shenanigans.
Yes.
And at some point we realized that, okay, this is something that most people don't really like to do. They would rather be in a position where they can division up from the beginning. There's not that much of scumbaggery going on.
Right. It's a very strange social mechanic that's suddenly added to the game, with that mode. I actually recall, and I'm going to mention Gaishu one more time because I'm a Gaishu fanboy and I'm a simp for Gaishu, so there you go. I remember watching him play the key battles on stream, and I'd realized all of a sudden there's that one boat that like it has a speed boost, and then it has a consumable skill that it made you invulnerable and increased your ramming damage. So the whole point was like you get to ram something. That's the whole thing. So I just remember him going, "Oh, hold on a second. I think I just figured something out." And he approaches one of his teammates. He hits the ramming thing, like he hits the ramming consumable, he hits the speed boost, and then right before he leaves the division, he rams the guy and steals his filth. And I was like, oh my god, that's so funny. And he goes, it's like he's so understated. He goes like, I guess it works. It's just, you can totally see why people would get so upset about it. Well, so if you, Crysantos, for example, had the opportunity to walk into the vault at Wargaming and steal the filth of one boat in the game, completely remove it from the game, you can literally leave its team in the game and ram it and completely remove it from the game. What boat are you gonna steal the filth from?
It's going to be the infamous FDR.
Oh! First time ever. No one said that. Why?
Why do you dislike the FDR?
Why do you dislike the FDR? What's it ever done to you?
It kicked me out of a game or 2 or 3 or 4. No,
Did you try dodging?
Did you try dodging?
I did. Yeah, no, I'm personally like I'm not a big fan of the design of it in terms of like how it works. And if it would be up to me, I would probably just remove it. Up until like a year ago, would have probably been the Smolens, because I just don't like ships where it's really really hard to interact with. You know, it's like a very one-sided equation of the battle. So for me, it would be FDR. I'm just gonna be straight up here. That's my choice. I'm not the biggest CV fan in general.
Well, we don't know what you're talking about. We love the FDR. In fact, we think that FDR should be in every game mode, especially that one clan brawl mode where it was 4v4 and you have to take one carrier, one battleship, one cruiser, and one destroyer, because I thought the FDR really shined in that game mode.
So let me just write that down, that you would love to keep it in there.
I would.
Thank you.
Put it on Reddit, folks. I'll Boggzy's FDR simp. Jeez. Well, Chris, it's very nice of you to do this again. It's been just over an hour and oh my god, almost an hour and a half now, almost the same amount of time. Thank you for being willing to talk warships on your day off and to come help us create some content and have a good time. It's always a pleasure talking with you. Borla, do you have anything else to ask our illustrious guest before we let him go back to whatever people do on Sunday nights in Prague?
No, I'll just echo, I'm used to covering for Boggsy and his stupid stuff, and I appreciate you helping us cover for Boggsy and his stupid stuff this time.
Sharing is caring. Sharing is caring.
Yeah, the guys in KSC say I have big shoulders. Well, this time I got some help, and I was glad to
carry the podcast this time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but guys, I really enjoyed this episode, even for a second time.
Again, I enjoyed it.
The rerun was nearly as good.
Yeah, no, like I love talking about World of Warships. It's my passion, at work but also off work. And I really love what you're doing with the podcast. And I hope that more people, when they listen to this episode, will just take a look back at like their own career in World of Warships, like where they started from and where they ended up now in terms of what they used to play and how they are as a player. Because for me, it's a very funny thing when I talk with people about like how I started the game, how I perceived the game, mechanics, and what changed over the years. And when you talk to people like Borla or you, but especially Borla, because he started the game at a similar time as I did, and you remember these things that you have completely forgotten about. Like they are in a hidden chamber in your brain, like locked away. That it used to be a thing, and talking about it is just a very entertaining thing. So thank you for making this episode. It was a blast.
Absolutely. Yeah. Again.
Well, and one of the things that I know your job entails sometimes, Chris, is going through all of the negative feedback, and there are things that happen that people are unhappy about and that get attention. And I think Boggsy and I have tried to be kind of pragmatic and realistic about most of the things that have happened. And there are things that have happened that we disagree with. There's things that we agree with, or we try to explain how both sides work. We thought this episode would be fun because looking back, there are a lot of quality of life things. There are a lot of things that have improved. So sometimes we want to pick up our torches and pitchforks, and frankly, sometimes there are things where you say, well, I've said it before on this. I think Wargaming should have done this differently or that differently. Or
FDR.
Yeah, but it's not a zero-sum game of. Right. Oh, it's absolutely evil, absolutely everything else. And we're not going to get into some of the things that have happened the last few days on purpose. That's
Why,
better talked about. Nothing's going on
Nothing's
Reddit or
happening.
the forums, Boggsy. But sometimes it's better to look back. You said earlier, hindsight's 20/20. Sometimes it's better to let some time go, look at the whole story, look at everything, and then decide where on the spectrum between really good and really bad the actual events are.
Yeah. By the way, so like before we stop this episode, now I'll ask you a question. So if you could, after all this time that you played World of Warships, is there anything you would love to bring back? Anything in the game where you...
Yes, I have an immediate answer.
This sounds so familiar. You asked us this last time. I don't even remember what my answer was.
So, we talked a little bit about playing low-tier battles, and I believe in take 1, Chris, you admitted to a little bit of seal clubbing scumbaggery yourself.
No!
Just a little bit. So I have an 11-kill Mikasa game under my belt, and I used to, and we talked about on the podcast, and the joke was in our group of Killsteel, Borla wakes up in the morning and he gets his cup of coffee and he walks in his office and he plays a tier 2 Mikasa game to start his day. And some of it was to farm the flags. Some of it was just because it was, an easy way to wake up and whatever. So, so I do wish we still had the way to earn flags in bunches by the achievements. So that's one thing I would bring back.
I gotta be honest, that's the first thing that comes to my mind as well. It really felt good earning something that I could use for playing well. That was a game mechanic that I was really sad to see go. I would sort of like to I think I'd like to see Savage Battles come back. That was I talk about it all the time. If you listen to this podcast a lot, you've probably heard me bitch and whine about this constantly, but I really liked the way that Savage Battles worked, because even though it was an exaggerated form of DD combat, it actually taught me to be a better DD player. That's where I learned how to dodge, because of that. It was exaggerated, of course, but that's when I was like, oh, this is fun. I want to get better at DDs in general. And there was also a boat at the end of it. There was a boat available that was exclusive, and not a bad boat. Venom's pretty good. It's a fun boat. So I suppose I wish that there were, I guess I wish that something like that would come back and stay. It was a fun game mode. It was something that I could, for a while there, I played more Savage Battles than randoms, which maybe that's why they took it away. I don't know. But, with these game modes, I really, really like it when there's a ship that you can earn at the end of it. I like the dockyard in general. I think it's a really cool game mode because I'm incentivized to want to come in and work towards something that I can keep. That's a thing that, as a game player, and I've been playing games for since I've been playing computer games since I was, in middle school in 1940, because I'm 100 years old. I love it when you can grind through something and have something to show for it. I like the dockyard because of that reason, and I really liked it in Savage Battles that you could grind out a Venom. I didn't get a Venom. I don't know if you guys know that.
Is that Venom envy?
Slight one.
Having slight Venom envy.
There's Boggsy looking up his port, and I pull up with a Venom, towing a Venom.
It's like Kitakami light. It's so many torpedoes, you guys. Shout out to Aragorn, by the way. Aragorn in my clan made the Venom work in the Tier 9 clan battle season on the off flank for probably 2 or 3 weeks until it became suboptimal, or until it was clear that it was suboptimal. But he specifically, made I even made a meme out of the Aragorn from Lord of the Rings going, when he charges towards Mordor or whatever it is, and I think I made it said there will come a day when the Venom cannot hold a flank on its own, but it is not this day, and he charges off.
I do think the dockyard, obviously with the PR, there was a lot of kickback and that particular implementation, but in general, the idea of the dockyard, the artwork with the dockyard, and the way the missions have stacked up in subsequent events with the dockyard, I really do think that's a nice addition. Yeah. The other thing I think that is good is the way clan battles have limitations and bans and adjustments. I think, TNG and KSC are very active in clan battles. I've got 30 Typhoon wins in every single season of clan battles since season 1.
And he's got 2 Benhams.
And 2 Benhams. So, I've played a lot of clan battles. That's a good addition to have the limitations and things. And so,
I mean, maybe Borla wants to be very kind and give you one of his Benhams.
I'm gonna start a GoFundMe to get me a Benham.
I'll give Boggsy one of my Benhams if you find a way to get me an Iwaki Alpha and an Arkansas Beta.
There it
is. Nice try. Look, I have pretty much every single ship in this game, but the one ship that I don't have is the Iwaki Alpha. Because for us as employees, the same rules apply. That hey, if you haven't played in the alpha, and I haven't because I started in CBT, you cannot get this ship. So it's the one ship that I will never be able to get, and I'm very sad about it. Because
I need to go back and see
Iwaki Envy.
Before I knew better, I may have sold the Arkansas Beta, in which case I could probably get it back.
No!
Right?
I did the same. So like this is such a stupid story, right? But I started playing the game, and I played the CBT. And you get to I played Japanese battleships up to tier 8, and I was really happy. Then everything gets reset, right? And you're like, oh, okay, you gotta start over again. And then I saw my reward that I got for playing in the beta, and I was an idiot. So I look at the ship, I see an Arkansas beta, and I look at it, and it's like, this is the Wyoming that I already currently, I'm on my way grinding to that ship, and it comes with stupid 6 slots. I don't have the credits to, do anything with this ship. It has no AA. You know what? I'll just sell it and use the credits to buy my
Oh my god!
I didn't even realize what it means to have 3 additional slots on that ship.
Right.
And for me, it was just a matter of no, okay, I'll take the credits. That's fine for me, and I have an open port slot because it's very, very important to have port slots in the beginning. And then by now we have an automated restoration system that you can actually get that ship back. But that's something that wasn't available until the time when I've been working for Wargaming for quite a while. And one of my colleagues, she was super nice. She was on my team, and she knew that I sold my Arkansas Beta, and there was no way for me to really get it back because it was sold. So no way to get it back without any help from outside. And she actually arranged within the company that customer support would actually restore my Arkansas Beta for Christmas as a gift. So that was really nice, and I got to then the Seal Club a bit.
Nice. Wow. I'm jealous. Yeah.
So when my Twitch channel finally accumulates enough channel points to make me sell the egg gear, which is their goal, by the way. They just want me to sell the egg gear. You're saying as a year down the road, I can get it back.
Yes, you can. That's the thing. So that's something we actually introduced, which is very nice. You can just automatically restore any ship if you have the resources in game. So that's also true for the Arkansas Beta Borla. If you ever sold it, you can get it back automatically.
I'm going to double check that because I may have it. With the timing, I believe I would have had it, and I just sold it. Because, like you said, back in the first few months of playing this game, port slots and things like that. And I know there were a couple other premiums that I sold and either re-earned or got, like Aurora and Diana and some of those early ones.
Yeah, and let's be honest, when you start this game, you're an idiot. You don't know how things are working, right? And
I've never deleted a podcast episode.
And with that, I will take a bow and slowly recede into darkness. Oh man. Well, I have no further questions for you, Chris. Borla, anything else?
No, I just really appreciate your time and hope you enjoy what's left of your weekend.
You too, guys. Thank you very much for having me, and stay safe.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, we'll close it out here. Thank you to everybody, by the way, who has continued to listen to this podcast. We do it because it's fun for us, and we enjoy talking about a game that we like, so we hope that you also enjoy it. Thank you to Chris. Please go check him out on the official World of Warships Twitch channel. He and his twin, Mr. Conway, deliver updates, update info, news. They deliver when the new ships are available to talk about. That's where they do it. So please go check them out and make sure you comment on Mr. Conway's hair. It's literally the reason to watch the channel is Mr. Conway's hair. So, yeah. Once again, thank you so much for doing this again.
My pleasure. Happy to come a third time, but I hope you recorded this one.
I did, and I had Borla record it just in case I was an idiot again. So, with that being said, everybody, have a great weekend, and have fun in clan battles, tier 6, double CV. If you get upset, come tell me on my Twitch stream. And thank you for listening. This has once again been Get to Know World of Warships. We'll see you guys later.
Bye-bye.